No, they have an audience.
Yes.
That would be the main difference.
Hey, it's been picking up a little bit.
Yeah, it has. Actually, every now and then we'll get a little uptick, and we'll get about 100 downloads in a day or something like that. So
I think that's pretty impressive.
Even if we're not getting tons of regular support, we're glad to put this podcast out there. Which podcast, do you ask? Why, Camera Academy, of course.
Dun, dun, dun.
From your friends here at Meta Camera. That's me, Nick, and Nikolai over here.
Yeah, me, Nick, and Nikolai. I was about to say, it sounds like there's three people. It's like, who's the third?
Oh, no, Nick and Nikolai.
Who's the other Nick?
We're the social media cohorts, and no one else is willing to embarrass themselves publicly,
By
so
the way,
it's just
I
us.
didn't tell you this before, but the air conditioning is broken here currently.
That's all right. We can make
So
our way
it's-
through it. There are
it's gonna
currently
get a little warm.
there are currently like 12-year-olds free diving through a tunnel in Thailand in order to get out of a cave. So I think we can manage with a little
Just letting you know.
the broken air conditioning.
Just letting you know.
Other kids have it worse.
They do.
And these two kids right here from Meta Camera are going to talk to you about lighting today.
Ooh, boy.
Just the basics of lighting, of course. We're not going to get too involved because lighting is one of those topics that you can just talk about for hours, or you can demonstrate for hours, or you can take classes for weeks and weeks and months, and you'll never know everything there is to know about
Never.
lighting because it's just like an endlessly shapeable art. It's something that has a million different techniques. There's so many rules that you can follow or not follow.
Yeah. I
So-
tend not to.
So we're just going to sort of go over the basics so that if you're a beginning photographer or, an amateur or whatever, and you don't know much about lighting, maybe you'll pick up a few pointers today and you can apply that to your current work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing we should get out of the way first is color temperature. We did a whole episode about color temperature.
Yes.
So we would advise you to head over to the color temperature episode and review that so that you know what we're talking about when we talk about daylight versus
Wow, it's a lead-in.
incandescent versus shade versus direct sunlight, that kind of stuff. You need to know the color temperature if you want your pictures to have the correct color balance. So check out that podcast before you you could do this one first.
You'll be a little confused, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Possibly.
But we won't talk that much about color temperature
I
today.
don't know. I kind of just wing everything I say, and Nick reads a script.
I do not. How dare you? A script.
You make an outline, so you sound, and that's why you always sound more professional than me. And don't say every second.
It has more to do.
But I think that's the quality of this show. We
that.
have a little yin, a little yang.
Anyway, if you if you're still with us, head over to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any of our other channels. Of course, Cometa.com if you want to buy any equipment, lighting equipment, camera equipment, lenses, accessories, etc. And of course, like I said before, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah.
And YouTube as well.
Yes, YouTube, Cometa Camera.
All right, so lighting.
Yeah, where to start?
I mean, lighting is everything, really. When it comes to photography, your camera is important, your lenses are important, technique is important, but...
If you got no light, you got no picture, homie.
Okay.
I was going to say El Jefe because I've just been watching Scott Hall promos for the past week, but
Well,
Again, we're
for the
getting off track.
uninitiated, Reza Hamon.
El
That's,
Jefe.
that's Scott Hall right there.
yes.
So lighting, as far as I'm concerned, is really what separates good photography from bad or from amateur photography. Flat lighting, just plain ambient lighting usually won't cut it. You need to know a little bit about your light sources, how to direct them.
How to fill
and
them.
How to fill them, how to fill all the shadows. You got to know about shadow as well, not only the light, but the shadow. There's just so much to get into. Now, from a technical perspective, like you said before, if you got no lighting, you got no pictures. Good lighting is important for getting your proper exposure, having a sufficient shutter speed. If you don't have good lighting, you won't have sharp photos. Unless you have a super long shutter speed, and that's an entirely different technique.
And a tripod.
And a tripod.
And a remote
You also
release.
want to have good lighting so that you don't have grainy photos because you want to have a low
Nice
ISO.
Low ISO, yes.
Right. So there's lots of technical reasons to have good lighting, but I would say the artistic portion of your photography is much more important when it comes to lighting.
Yeah, and you can have a real cruddy camera and have good lighting and composition, and the photo will look good versus someone who doesn't have vision and know how to work lighting.
That's right. And if you were to take the same person in the same location with the same framing and composition and all that stuff, and you just shoot a picture at different times of the day, and not even like noon versus golden hour, we're talking about noon versus 1 o'clock, your picture will change pretty dramatically.
Yeah,
and
it's a couple degrees difference.
And that alone will demonstrate to you how important lighting is, and even subtle differences can be. So why don't we start this by talking about the different sources of light that as a photographer you're going to encounter on a pretty regular basis. The first thing and the most noticeable thing is what's around you, natural light. So we're talking about that big light source in the sky.
Praise the sun.
The sun. We've determined through science, the magic of science, that it's no longer brought by the sun god Ra in a boat. We revolve around it.
Do we?
Indeed we do revolve around it, unless
I don't know. I've heard the Earth is pretty flat, so.
Well, I've heard that as well. There's significant evidence to the contrary.
I think there was someone that built a rocket to prove it.
Didn't he crash that rocket?
Maybe.
He either crashed it or he never came back. But whatever happened, I'm sure it didn't prove his point that the Earth was flat.
Forgot that you can't see my facial expressions through a microphone, even though we do have a camera on us right now.
So you go outside, you've got your sunlight out there, and that's going to provide a lot of lighting, not only outdoors, but indoors as well, because it's going to filter in through windows and everything. And there is your natural and ambient lighting. Now,
and window lighting, if you got the right kind of, curtain as a diffuser,
right,
put through it.
So the good thing about natural lighting is that, number one, it's everywhere. There's no gear required. It's free.
Sometimes.
Well, I mean, you don't have to always bring along reflectors, but we'll get into that.
If you want to shape it, you can have things like that.
Daylight is natural looking, so you're going to get natural looking color as long as you have it white balanced properly.
Yep.
And you can change, like I said before, the look of your photos depending on the time of day. So when you're shooting at noontime, you're going to get the brightest sun. You're going to be able to get the most sharp detail because it's going to be so bright out. You'll be able to use very fast shutter speeds.
Be careful, because it'll be contrasty.
But it's going to be very contrasty. So
if you're shooting outside.
If you're shooting outside, you're going to get shadows that are coming from straight up ahead. They're going to cast shadows down, so people are going to get those raccoon eyes. There's going to be, it's not very flattering lighting.
Which works great for my style. But,
but if you like really contrasty shooting, then shooting in direct sunlight in the middle of the day is a great idea. If you don't, you want to be shooting later in the day, perhaps golden hour, which is 5, 6 o'clock when the sun is just about to set.
There's also the golden hour in the morning as well.
And there is one in the morning as well.
I'm not an early bird.
So then you've got those, and then you've got cloudy days. Yes.
Yeah.
Clouds act as
natural diffusers.
As a giant softbox in the sky. So clouds work as a very good diffuser, giving you more.
We both just kicked our mics at the same time. That was great.
That's all right. We don't have to worry about that.
But actually, if you ever, as a wedding photographer for a portion of my life, every client would always get, oh man, it's so cloudy out, the pictures are gonna stink. That's actually the best environment to shoot portraits outside, because it diffuses the light and it just gives you nice, even, beautiful light the entire time.
And you'll be able to get that light without having any gear along with you.
Exactly.
Like, you can shoot in bright sunlight with shadows everywhere, but you'll need to bring along some artificial lighting to fill in the shadows. So the only problems then you have with daylight is, well, you have no control over it.
Nope, none.
Doesn't matter what you do unless you have some kind of power over the celestial bodies that we revolve around. As a matter of fact, I don't know if never mind. Continuing on. I was going to correct myself, but then I think I was right. Natural light is pretty easy to learn because there's not too many variables.
Kind of go out and shoot and pay attention to where you're shooting. There's also, you do have a little bit of control over, natural light with reflectors.
Yep.
You can use fill flash Even some continuous lights are bright enough to work through it if you're in the shade or something like that. But you're going to kind of need modifiers on those to control how much light's going where, because if you're shooting a couple or a subject that's like next to a tree, you don't want to light up the tree with the subject. You want to just light up the subject to make them stand out just a little bit more.
Right. And then natural light, even when you get those nice cloudy days, sometimes you want to add a little bit something to it just to make your subjects pop, because you might get that really nice flat, not flat, but diffused lighting outside, but it's still not enough. There's something missing. Sometimes you want to bring along a fill flash just to add some sparkles to your subject's eyes. Yep. You might want to just increase the color on their skin to make them pop a little bit more. So even when you're working outside and you've got natural light available to you, you still might want to bring along some gear, like an off-camera flash or an on-camera flash, whatever. You can dial down the power of it.
Yep, and just a side note on that, if it's extremely bright outside, you're going to need a flash with high-speed sync on it, because your shutter speed's probably going to be faster than like 500th of a second.
Yep, that's a...
Or you can also have an ND filter handy as well. That should be able to help
I know we've talked about this in a previous episode, but what does an ND filter do?
It's called neutral density. Basically, it's a filter that you put on that has a little bit of a darker glass on it, so that way you can stop down your camera. So if you're at like 500th of a second and at 5.6, you can put this filter on and you'll have to slow your shutter speed down and open up your aperture more to get a proper exposure, because you're shooting through dark glass.
And one thing that people use those for is when you have a bright day, like a really bright day, and you want to shoot some moving water, and you want to get that motion, like you've got your camera on a tripod and you want to get that feeling of motion with the water, put an ND filter on there so that you can have a slower shutter speed, because lots of light's going to be coming into your camera.
And it's also handy for shooting portraits in the bright sunlight, because you want to have the golden rule. You want that nice blurry background, so you want a
wide open aperture,
which sometimes is not achievable with the base lens and even the best of cameras out in bright sunlight.
Right. Now, you mentioned before window light. That's something that is a staple of portrait photography. It's something that's achievable in almost any location, and because your background is essentially a window or what's really close to it, you don't have to worry about your background all that much. So it's a good place to just get nice single portraits, usually just of the face or maybe just torso and up. And you can do that pretty much anywhere. Now, is there anything special about window light that just...
It's basically a big softbox. Just imagine like a huge flash that's like, well, not a huge, like a huge like LED light or something like that. It's just a big box of light. And if it's dark inside, that's going to be concentrated right there.
Another cool thing about window light is that you're going to be contrasting the daylight temperature of whatever's outside versus the color temperature of whatever lights you have inside. So you can kind of get an interesting look with like kind of bluish cast on one side and reddish cast on the other, and that may not be what you want, but
just be careful, because like sometimes tungsten lights will ruin those kind of shots.
Tungsten lights have ruined lots of shots for me in the past. Photo and video.
Yep, I've requested several times if I was in a venue or something like that for them to turn off the lights for the portraits, because it just does not look flattering through the window light with that mix with tungsten.
Yeah.
You'll also notice if you go to a lot of studios, like photography studios or very like upscale venues or places like that, they actually will make sure the windows are constructed a certain way where it will complement the cycle of the sun, so the light always looks good inside without any interior lights on.
Well, you gotta have lots of forethought to figure that out before you make your studio.
But back when we put thought into these things. I actually had a friend that built.
You're saying you don't have to now that we have a Lightroom?
Yeah. Well, I actually have a friend, my friend Jesse, who has a studio up in where is it? I forgot the town, but it's above New York City. He actually had a studio made, and he sat there all day to watch where the sun was so he can figure out where to put his windows. That's dedication. Jesse Rinka, people, look him up. He's a great wedding photographer.
All right. Is that your only plug for today?
That's my shameless plug for my friend.
All right, so speaking of tungsten lights, then we have another kind of lighting. This is continuous lighting, not continuous from the sun, but continuous from an artificial source.
Yes.
Now, there are a couple kinds of artificial lighting. There are continuous lights and there are flashes. We'll talk about flashes in a few minutes. But let's just talk about continuous lighting now. Basically, what that means is it's always on.
Yeah, a constant light.
A constant light. So the most simple kind of continuous lighting you can use is a light bulb. Everyone starts out taking the lampshade off of their lights and putting them over to the side when you're taking Christmas portraits for that first time. But eventually you have to upgrade a little bit and start getting yourselves something a little bit more professional. So you can start with something nice and cheap like tungsten lights, like you mentioned, or you can go with fluorescents. They make fluorescent bulbs, which are usually those big old spirally ones.
Got
And
those, yep.
those will usually have a daylight balanced color temperature. And they're relatively inexpensive. They're a little bit fragile.
Yeah.
And sometimes the color reproduction is not perfect on those. Sometimes they can have a little bit of a greenish tone to them. So you have to make sure that your camera is balanced to a fluorescent light if you use one of those. But those are the ones that you get if you go on Amazon or whatever, or Meta.com. Those are the ones that are like, if the whole kit, like 30 different lights, is under $200 or whatever, that's usually what you're
Yeah,
getting.
it's usually that kind of light. No, that doesn't have the flicker effect on it, does it?
It can, yes.
It is.
Fluorescent lights, cameras are getting better at adjusting for this, but they flicker a little bit, or the cycling of the lights doesn't match up with the shutter speed. So when you're shooting video, you'll notice this more often if you don't have the frame rate of your video synced up to the fluorescent lighting.
It can happen in pictures too.
Right.
In certain situations. So
if you
just
happen
kinda
to
be
get an
wary.
exposure at the exact same time that it's cycling off, then yeah, you could get a dark picture.
We
in
have
there.
explained flicker before in another episode, but basically what it is an LED light like that,
fluorescent.
LEDs
can do it too.
Yeah, LEDs can do it too. We can't see with our human eye, but they're actually, like, it's not one consistent light. They're actually flickering really, really, really fast. We just can't see it with the human eye. So if you hit it right with a camera at a certain speed and certain aperture and whatever setting you have, you can see like a little black line or something like that going through the image. Like you said, a lot of cameras now, modern cameras, can compensate for this. They have the flicker prevention built into it.
Yep.
But it can happen every now and then. So if you see a black line come out of nowhere, then you don't see it again. That's probably what happened. Just one of those rare instances.
Yeah, not something wrong with your camera.
No.
But sometimes it's worth putting up with that once in a while when you can get an entire set of lights for like $100 or whatever.
Exactly.
So,
My first kit cost me like $120, and it was two lights with one single bulb in them. And I got a lot of work done with them.
yeah, and they provide a pretty decent amount of light, and you can get ones that have like 5 bulbs in them.
Yep,
And
like ours.
they don't use that much energy. They don't really produce much heat, so you can have them on for a long time, and people aren't going to get all what?
It just reminded me the first time I bought a studio light.
Oh yeah, the indoor sun.
Yeah, no. My first indoor, my first monolight, 320 watt seconds, and tried running that at my house
Oh, and it just blew the breakers.
in my room.
Well, that's what tungsten lights used to do all the time. Old tungsten lights, which you can still get if you want to have that kind of look.
They're getting harder and harder to get, though. Like
Yeah.
it's like very like specific to photography now. It seems like everything's kind of going, and it's a good thing that it's going in the energy efficiency route.
Yeah, we definitely don't carry them anymore, but if you wanted to use tungsten or halogen lights, you can still find them, you can still use them. They'll give you a warmer color temperature most often, although of course they make bulbs that have daylight balanced tungsten lights. But they're very big, they're very hot, they use a ton of energy.
And they burn out fairly quick compared to the LEDs and the fluorescents now.
And the bulbs are still expensive. It's not like they're the old incandescent bulbs and they were a dime a dozen. They're still pretty expensive. So it's not like you're saving a lot of money. You're basically just using them if you want a specific look, or if you want to specifically avoid any type of flicker at all.
Or if it's really cold out and you just want like a little heat lamp.
If you don't heat your studio. So those are still available, but we're not going to talk too much about those. Anyway, as far as the fluorescents go, we can finish that part up. The only other downside to those is that they are going to require AC power. So you can't really take those on out in the field with you. Even though they don't use a lot of energy, they do require, a decent current. So you're going to have to plug them in.
Yep.
And then we've got LEDs, which is the wave of the future, or really the wave of now. LEDs have really come a long way in the last few years, and I would say they're pretty much the standard equipment for most videographers and photographers who prefer continuous lighting.
Low energy, you can mainly use batteries with them. Don't need to really plug them in unless you got like a really big studio size one, which you can actually put batteries in as well. Just don't get as long of a run time.
Right.
They're super bright. The only downfall of that is sometimes they have a really quick fall off.
Yes. Well, usually because they don't spread out as much.
Yeah.
Like if you look at a fluorescent bulb, one of those big old spirally bulbs, those are diffused as soon as the light is emitted. With LEDs, the light is directional, and those have to be spread out via a diffuser of some kind.
Which usually comes built in, or it has it as an accessory with it.
Right. So, yeah, the fall off is a result of LEDs being directional. So you have to figure out a way to position your lights in order to get the lighting that you want.
Yeah.
But that being said, like you said, they're low energy consumption, low heat.
They last almost forever.
Yeah, if you get a good one, they make cheap ones too. They make bad ones, but if you get a decent one, it'll last a long time. They typically have the best color reproduction. So there's a number on there called CRI, and it's usually they'll advertise ones that are in the 90s. So you want something about like CRI 95, and that'll give you really good color reproduction. And let's see, they make ones that are dimmable. We've reviewed a couple of those on YouTube.
We got a ton of them. I have it. I own a ton of them.
Some of them you can change the color temperature. Some you can change the color. So they have ones that have a bunch of LEDs built into it that are different colors, and from blue to red if you want to light your backgrounds in different ways.
And they're fairly well priced too.
Yeah, I mean, the technology's been around long enough that they're starting to get really inexpensive. So if you're serious about photography at all these days...
And video,
yeah, video especially.
That's the one plus about continuous lighting, is you can use it for photo and video at the same time.
That's true, very true. There's really no excuse to ignore LED as, a really viable option. Yes, they can be more expensive. If you want to run off batteries, the batteries can get expensive. But typically I find that it's worth it to have that available to you rather than worry about, as what happened to me on a recent shoot, breaking fluorescent bulbs while you're out in the field. While you're on location and you don't have any spares to work with. LEDs are durable, they're robust, and they really don't use up any energy at all. So they're really great to have.
Yes.
So
that pretty much covers that.
Yep, there's your continuous lighting, and then you can get all of those in different color temperatures. You just got to figure out what's right for you. But continuous lighting it's become much more popular now that everyone's sort of going to like a hybrid. Not everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but like a lot of people want to have a hybrid photography as their business. They want to be able to do video. They want to be able to do still photography. They want to be able to use those lights in different locations and for different purposes. Everything has to be sort of a multi-purpose tool rather than things that are, as Alton Brown on Good Eats says, a unitasker. We don't want any unitaskers in the studio.
Most event photographers now have a photo and video business built in together.
Yep. So then we've got our other light source, which is something that I think is... Well, it's been around probably, 100 years when they started making flashes? Those ones that used to pop and...
As soon as you were
a little...
one shot and you're done?
Chemical reaction or gunpowder or some stuff like that. I used to have a flash that they were called a flip flash, and I would put it into my 110 camera, and it had 8 flashes in it, and each one of them had a little chemical reaction inside. So when you hit the shutter... it would fire off one of those flashes.
And it would cycle.
And well, what you would have to do is when you did 4 of them, you'd have to flip the flash upside down, and then it would do the other 4. It was really cool. But yeah, we're talking about flashes, or strobes, as some people want to call it.
Strobist.
So, all right, let's talk a little bit about strobes. Number 1, the best thing about them, they're portable and they're powerful.
Yes. I don't know how else to...
And this is the point at which you elaborate. Well, all right.
Well,
so
basically, they're going to be for photography. The output of them is unmatched compared to pretty much any continuous light.
Right, because it's just a flash, and you can output a ton of power in a fraction of a second. If you were to output that kind of light intensity and keep it going,
you're going to be blind.
You'd need to have like a nuclear reactor sitting next to you, or you'd be, running out of batteries pretty quickly.
Yes. So you can keep your ISO nice and low. You can keep your shutter speed pretty fast, and you can pretty much choose what your aperture wants to be.
And in most cases, you can bring it all with you. Now, of course, there's studio strobes where things are plugged in and they use up a ton of energy per flash. But for the most part, we bring our flashes with us, and they run off batteries.
Yep.
So whether you're using a high-powered monolight, that'll come with big battery packs, or whether you're just using a little speed light that attaches to your camera, or maybe even the flash that's attached to your camera, you can take them with you, and you don't have to worry about replacing bulbs. Because flash bulbs, unless you're using like a big expensive monolight, the flashes never go bad.
Yeah, I've had my flash for 10 years plus now, and it's still going strong, and I use it a lot.
You can have them on camera. You can have them off camera. They can be wirelessly controlled.
Yeah.
You can have one flash go off, and it'll set off another flash. That's called a slave function. So you've got the master flash and the slave flash. You can run them all through radio control. Like I said before, wirelessly controlled, but you can do it not only optically, you can do it wirelessly.
Yep, some of them have them built in. Some other ones you have to buy an extra unit to get it to work properly.
You're going to get excellent color, generally speaking, depending on what kind of surroundings you have. But you're going to get you'll be able to fill in shadows. You'll be able to use it as a main light. You can use it as a fill light. You can use it just for a little bit of hair light, for if you want to just get a little bit of twinkle in the eye.
Ambiance in the background.
A little bit of ambiance. If you're shooting against backlighting, you've got a beautiful sunset in the background, but you don't want to have a silhouette, and you want to just you need enough power to go up against that sunlight. Bring your flash.
Yep.
You're not going to be able to accomplish that with some continuous lighting that you bring along. It's not going to have enough power. You're going to need a flash for that. If you've got your subjects far away, you're going to need to bring along a flash, because you're not going to have enough reach to get someone who's 30 feet away. You're going to need to have a nice powerful flash, or a monolight. Not a monolight, but should I say monolight?
Monolight.
A strobe monolight.
Yeah.
A big strobe. And flashes are reliable. The color temperature is always the same. The output, unless you're running low on batteries, will always be the same.
It has its own white balance setting.
It's already set to a specific
Pre-built
color
into your
temperature.
Camera. And I'm pretty sure that's in every camera.
If you're getting flashes that are made for your camera, or brand name flashes specifically, you're going to be getting stuff that works perfectly with your camera's exposure system.
Yeah.
And that's called TTL. It's through the lens.
Now, you can get third-party flashes that are built for your system, but I guess in both of our experiences, they're never as accurate as a name brand.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which ones you get. I think you use a Nissan flash quite often with your Fuji camera.
I have the Nissan, and it actually works very well. Never had an issue with it. I actually also have like a cheap Vivitar for my Nikon that actually works pretty well. The only thing that's not good about it to me is that it doesn't, like the grid focus, what do you call it, the IR.
Okay.
Like when it puts the red, I keep forgetting the name of it.
Autofocus assist.
Yeah, the autofocus assist light.
Yep.
Not as good as the Nikon one.
Well, usually when you're buying a brand name flash, you're paying for something. Not only the name, but the quality, the ability for that flash to operate, seamlessly with your camera system. So I personally have all of my on-camera flashes are brand name flashes, and then I've got some which are cheaper brands that I fire wirelessly.
Yep, that works.
But regardless of what brand you use, having flashes is really the only way to shoot if you're a field photographer. If you're shooting portraits or if you're shooting like weddings, like you said before, they don't bring along big continuous lights with soft boxes and stuff like that. They'll bring along a flash setup because it's infinitely more positionable. You can really customize things, and if you're getting good quality flashes, ones that are going to cost you a pretty penny, you'll be able to do a lot of manual tinkering around with it to get the looks that you want. And of course, there's plenty of things that'll attach to your flashes if you want to diffuse the light more.
Color overlays. So if you want to add like a different color but have the lights balanced, you can have like a different like tint to them. Flash benders, like you said, are really awesome accessories you should look into.
Yep, we carry those. Those are by a company called Rogue.
MagMod is really cool as well.
Don't talk about that. We don't carry those yet.
I don't care. I own them and they're great.
MagMod's cool.
It was a great Kickstarter company and they make really good products.
So those are a lot of the benefits of strobes and flashes. Now, of course, the main disadvantages are they can get pretty expensive.
Yes.
So if you wanted to have like a single wireless setup and you wanted like a main light and a hair light, and then maybe one more for fill, that could run you like $800-900 if you wanted to have first party flashes.
And the other kind of downfall is you can't get a preview of what the light's going to look like when the flash goes off,
which makes flash photography very hard to master.
It is very hard. That's why I prefer using LEDs, because I like being able to see things the way it's going to look before I take the shot. But like, again, there's no quality comparison from flash to LEDs in the field for photography. It's always handy to have those LEDs just in case something happens.
Yeah.
It's always good to have the flash just in case something happens to your LEDs. It's kind of just one of those things where it's nice to have both options.
Yeah. I think the main benefits for me when I'm shooting flash is that I'm able to fill in shadows that are really dark. I'm able to work in pretty tough conditions because now cameras are able to autofocus even in pretty dim conditions. So you can use flash even when it's really, really dark out, whereas before you couldn't really do that. You needed enough light to be able to focus.
Yeah, and TTL has come a long way.
Absolutely.
I remember my first couple point and shoots, it would like just the flash would just blow out everything, or everything would just be super contrasty and super dark. Now you use flash and it looks like it's almost natural light sometimes.
And you can make flash, you can position your flash in a way that it sort of mimics natural light. You can bounce it off different surfaces. You can have them come from different directions. Of course, if you're using wireless, you can position it pretty much anywhere. You can reflect it off of reflectors. You can do a million things with flashes just because they're so portable. But like I said, they're very expensive. They're hard to master. And like you mentioned before, there's no way to know what it's going to look like until you actually fire the shutter.
Yeah, so you might be sitting there doing like 50, 60 test shots before you get everything, the right power and the right angle and the way you want it.
Things are tough to get dialed in. That's why some flashes now do have presets, so that once you get those things dialed in certain situations, then you'll know next time I can just hit my preset and I'll have it pretty much where I want it to be. But that takes some practice. It takes a while to get to that point where you're using presets and knowing where you can use each preset.
Yeah, and also a lot of studio monolights and strobes, like the pro photos and like the more expensive ones, will have what they call modeling lights built into them.
Yes.
So it's got a light source in it just to kind of give you a kind of a preview of what the image should look like. Also, it helps light up the studio space as well.
And it helps for autofocus. I think that's the main reason to have it there.
No, well, they're called modeling lights.
Yes, I know.
Help you model.
Oh, I see.
You know, that's why it's called a model.
Oh, I see. Give you an idea of where the shadows are going to be and all that.
Yeah, just how everything's going to look.
Okay.
But it's also added benefit that it helps you autofocus.
Yes. Those are typically not that bright, if I recall.
No, they're pretty dim.
Yeah, so those aren't going to be useful for video, and that's the other downside to flashes is you can't use it for video. Obviously, it's basically just meant for still photography and for getting nice fast shutter speeds so that all of your handheld stuff especially can be nice and crisp.
Yep.
So I think that about covers basic photography lighting. Remember, you've got your 3 light sources. You've got the sun and whatever the sun illuminates. Then you've got your continuous lighting. So you've got tungsten or old-time light bulbs. You've got fluorescents, and you've got LEDs. Those are your 3 main sources of light as a photographer. And then, of course, you have strobes and or flashes. And almost everyone's camera is going to come with a flash built in, and you should immediately start thinking about upgrading to an external flash. Blah, blah, blah,
Speed
blah.
light.
A speed light. That's what their Nikon and Canon call them, though they spell them different ways.
Yes.
One of them
Which
is
is weird.
ITE and one is IGHT, and I don't know which one is which. I can't remember.
I don't know, but it's the same thing.
So if you hear the word speed light, that's what us photography nerds are referring to. So I think that pretty much covers it as far as the basic stuff. Like we said at the beginning of the show, there's just so much to get into when it comes to lighting. It's a never-ending topic. It's so wide-ranging, and no matter how much you learn, you'll never know all there is to know about lighting. So the best thing you can do is just start learning and keep practicing.
And there's also, if you need to learn how to use flashes, check out strobist.com.
Strobist.
Yep. Strobist.com.
Gotcha.
strobist.com.
Okay.
It's actually a community that kind of shows you how and tries to help you learn flash photography.
Okay. So they'll probably be more helpful than we were.
Oh, yeah. They'll go into detail. But also, YouTube's a great source. There are tons and tons of books and, programs you can buy on how to learn how to do flash photography. It's, again, like you said, it's something that's kind of hard to master. But once you get it down, you should be able to get a really good eye for it.
Cool. All right. So there it is. Basic lighting. And hopefully you can put all this knowledge that we've imbued upon you and create some really good, I don't know.
Portraits.
I was trying to come up with a better word than pictures or photos, but there really is no better word out there. Images.
There you
Dang,
go.
son. You done it.
Yeah.
All right,
it
everybody.
does sound more professional.
See you next time on Camera Academy.
Later.